Memes, I think, are a great way to, it just describes something in a totally different way than words. It's just the society that we live in, and pictures do a lot, visuals do a lot. People can understand things easier. And then there's the humor aspect of it too, which is awesome.
This is Roger Veer.
This is Zibo, the PCH Wolf.
This is John McAfee.
This is Vin Armani of Cointext.
And you are listening to
Humans of Bitcoin podcast,
part of the Bitcoin.com podcast network.
Hello, this is Matt Aaron, the host of Humans of Bitcoin. Today we have a very special guest on the show. He's a colleague of mine. Jamie Redman is, I believe, the longest tenured person at the Bitcoin.com news team. He's written over 2,000 articles for news.bitcoin.com alone. And before that, he was writing for just about every major publication in the crypto space. He is the patriarch of the original Bitcoin family. And what do I mean by that? Well, we covered Didi, the Dutch guy who was on the Wall Street Journal and all over the TV this past year as a traveling Bitcoin family where they sold all their possessions. Very interesting in its own right. But in researching that, I stumbled upon Jamie, my coworker, who never mentioned this. He's humble, he's understated. But I was like, wow, man, you were featured in Vice in 2015. That's before I really knew anything about Bitcoin. And you and your family have been living predominantly off cryptocurrency for years now. And pay attention to the way he sees economics and how that translates into day-to-day life for him as well as his family. Yeah, another fascinating interview. So here he is, Jamie Redman. Welcome to Humans of Bitcoin. We have Jamie Redman, the lead writer at news.bitcoin.com. Jamie, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Jamie, so starting out here, how many articles do you think you've written? I know 2,000 at Bitcoin.com, but before that, you were writing for a variety of publications. How many have you written, ballpark number?
5,000-ish. And I've written a lot of copyright and material that has not been published that people use for certain things like that. So a lot.
And so 5,000 articles, and what's the average word count?
Anywhere between 500 to 1,000.
So millions of words. Could be, in the 2.5 to 5 million words written on Bitcoin. That is a lot, man. I think you've got to be in the top 10 or top 20 in the world, maybe, in terms of just word count. Not that word count is everything, but it does mean you've spent a lot of time researching and thinking about this.
Yeah, definitely. It's something that I love to do. And, when you love your job and you can put so much passion into it, it works out, and I always tell that to people all the time.
Yeah, it sounds really cliche, but it's hard to find. That's the thing. Like, for a long time, Jamie, I didn't know. I've had times in my life where I was like, maybe I'm just not that excited by anything. Not in I'm super depressed, but just kind of thinking out loud what really, really excites me. And I've been into certain things over my life. Like I was very into food and nutrition. I still am. But Bitcoin was another level. And that was kind of like, the way, Stevie Wonder loves to make music. I think we love Bitcoin, and that's amazing.
Yeah, it definitely is.
And any American listener that, will recognize that New England accent. You haven't lost it since moving to Florida, where you're on an island now, and we'll get to that. But Jamie, take me back to, Jamie Redman, your pre-Bitcoin days. Where were you exactly?
Before Bitcoin, I was a graphic artist at a company called Builder 19, and we worked on hand-drawn, ads and signs and stuff. And me and my sister worked there together, and we slowly transitioned them into like Photoshop and digital art. And then around that time, around 2011, I heard about Bitcoin on libertarian forums on Facebook and Twitter and stuff like that. And I just heard about it, and I was very interested in it. And I just asked my wife if she wanted to buy some. And we used our tax return and bought a bunch as just for pure speculation at the time. And then suddenly I started reading and researching it regularly, and that's when I really got passionate about it. And it became way more than a speculative investment.
How did you buy it exactly, and how did you store it?
I bought it through Coinbase. I just stored it at Coinbase. I didn't know, about other wallets until a little later, like non-custodial wallets and stuff like that. So I stored it at Coinbase, left it there, and I actually sold a few when the first big bull run came out back in 2013 in the fall. So I wish I didn't at the time, but I did. And that's just life.
It's like everyone has those stories, man. Roger's lost so many thousands of Bitcoin. It's amazing with like MTGOX and everything. But he's also made a lot of Bitcoin. So it evens out. And also when we hear Coinbase today, the Coinbase of 2018, which is now larger than Schwab Bank, which is pretty incredible. How many employees do you think were at Coinbase when you bought your first Bitcoins? Less than 10?
Probably. The service wasn't the greatest at all. I can say that for a fact. So there wasn't very much going on. It was much different. They have a lot more coins on there now. It was just Bitcoin at the time. And it was the easiest way for me to buy Bitcoin at the time. Mt. Gox was still around, but I just never bothered to use them.
That was a good decision.
Yeah, it definitely was. Coinbase is still around, so.
More than just around, right? And Roger's talked about this. I mean, they have done quite a bit for the adoption of cryptocurrency. Maybe as much as any company there is.
Yeah, definitely. But I know now I don't store with them anymore. And, I learned more about holding your own private keys and storing in non-custodial wallets and stuff like that. I wouldn't recommend storing it at any exchange, Coinbase or stuff like that. I guess a small money, or if you want to trade and stuff like that, that's okay. But I don't store with exchanges anymore.
You're deep into Bitcoin, Jamie. But there are other people that, and Paul Pway talked about this from Edge Wallet. Everyone is worried about exchanges being hacked, and that's a fair concern to have. But I think a lot more Bitcoins have been lost by maybe Mt. Gox aside, and their hack, but just people forgetting passwords. And, I bought half a Bitcoin 3 years ago. Now I don't remember my password or where I stored it. And I think there's going to be a lot of losses of cryptocurrencies to that. And so if you do the cold storage, you have to take a little bit more responsibility on.
Yes, my sister lost a half a Bitcoin because she forgot her password. So
there you go. It happens. And so this is really interesting to me. You live in Florida, on an island now. So you're getting into Bitcoin up in New England. You bought it in 2011. When did you start writing and making art around Bitcoin?
That was roughly around 2015. And on Facebook and social media like Twitter and stuff like that, I just post memes and pictures, graphics. I had a website called cryptographics.com that I ran, and it was just funny stuff. I also wrote about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies every single day on Facebook and stuff, like long-winded paragraphs about everything I could write about. And Tony Lane, she was the CEO of Cointelegraph at the time. She asked me if I wanted to work there. And I accepted the position, and then from there I worked at like 8 different places, different publications that wrote about cryptocurrency, and that's when I started working, writing full-time.
That's amazing. And it's funny now, it has a non-serious, non-professional tone memes, but I think there's a lot of meme artists, meme creators that have done very well for themselves and had a lot of influence. And they started out that way, just making memes.
Yeah, definitely. Memes, I think, are a great way to, it just describes something in a totally different way than words, It's just the society that we live in, and pictures do a lot, visuals do a lot. People can understand things easier. And then there's the humor aspect of it too, which is awesome.
And 2015, 7 or 8 publications, meaning you were freelancing for just about every crypto publication there was. And you mentioned starting out with Cointelegraph. Why did you decide to join Bitcoin.com and go from, let's say, writing for 7 or 8 to just 1?
I was friends with Roger for a long time before I joined Bitcoin.com. And roughly around September of 2015, he told me he was going to revamp the website. It wasn't really doing much at the time. And he asked me, what would it take to, start a news site and stuff? And I said that you need constant news all the time. And that's kind of like what I produce. We're both into libertarianism and free markets and stuff. So that was another big reason why he asked me to join up. And that was a huge reason for me as well, And so I just decided to stay with Bitcoin.com full time.
Gotcha. And We both work for him, right? We know how amazing Bitcoin.com is. But what would you say the biggest misconception that someone that joins crypto, let's say from 2017 and to present, that's newer, has about Roger?
I think that because, he got in so early and that he has all this money, he's not like a normal dude when he really is the most down-to-earth guy I've ever met. And he could be like any guy, that is down-to-earth and nice. He's one of the nicest guys that I know. I think there's a lot of misconceptions maybe because of his wealth.
That makes sense. I also think that I've seen, right, I'm much newer than you are to the space, but I also tend to see people that don't know the history. And I always bring up this book. And I'm sure you know Brian Patrick Eha. I'd say another great writer in the space who wrote How Money Got Free, and they haven't read the history. And a lot of people think Roger's just like some YouTuber or something. But, he's the business developer in cryptocurrency and has been around for a long time. And there's a big difference than just doing content around cryptocurrency as, to starting businesses as a business developer or as a software developer with code.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Roger believed in it well before me and well before everybody. And he jumped in just like I did. I mean, I believed in it and I jumped into it, and we're all kind of taking a chance. I mean, I can still say to this day, it's still a big, giant experiment. So Roger kind of just started well before us, and he invested in all these companies and, infrastructure that was surrounding. So helped push the space too, as far as infrastructure is concerned.
Yeah, the big, giant experiment. I think that's a very apt word there. And also the way people buy it. I did the same thing. First, you buy Bitcoin because you read like a couple articles, like it seems kind of cool. And then you buy it and you're like, what did I buy exactly? And then you have to start researching to try to fully understand it as much as you can.
Yeah, definitely. You gotta research it and understand it, I guess, in my opinion, to, like I said, knowing about money and stuff is a good way for people to understand what's going on with the monetary system.
Yeah, and we mentioned this. Actually, full disclosure, I messed up with my recording button, and Jamie's gracious to re-record this with me. And our first recording, when I forgot to record, you talked about how important it is for adults to teach their children about money. We'll get into your family in a second, Jamie. But just starting out in terms of teaching kids about money, what is the biggest misconception about money that Americans have?
I think not just Americans, but fiat in general, the way that it's made, inflation and how inflation works. People always say, this used to cost this much money when my grandfather was alive, and now it costs this much money. And there's a reason for that, and it's called inflation. And people should understand how inflation works, how it makes your money less valuable. And there's definite reasons why it is. It's because it's printed in massive quantities. There's a lot of things going on with money with the fiat in your pocket, and I don't think that people understand, necessarily of why and how it works. That USD is not stable. If you compare it with, the yen and other currencies in the world, you can watch it in a graph, and it's not stable at all. And it's been in a deep decline since, 1913.
And stable is a relative word. And the whole Federal Reserve thing is, you have to look up, just how does the Federal Reserve work? How do they create money? One thing that has been an epiphany for me, Jamie, is that a lot of real estate, buying a house, is just protection against inflation. Not all of it. I know there are some great real estate developers out there that understand the location and how to create more value there. But for a lot of lower, middle, and upper class families, just holding cash is stressful because it's going to lose value. And you subconsciously maybe understand this, even if you don't consciously understand it's because of inflation in the Federal Reserve, but you can't just sit on $20,000. You have to put it into something that has a more fixed supply, like real estate, to protect your money against inflation. And at the end of the day, it's because it's not great money. And I think Bitcoin paints a picture. It's still an experiment, granted, but the idea that you can have sound money, meaning that you can hold on to it. You don't have to get some financial advisor who charges you 1% a year. Again, a deceptive amount. It's quite a lot of money. So you have to buy mutual funds and all these things you don't really understand because the US dollar doesn't hold value.
Exactly. And there's only 21 million Bitcoins. So there's a scarcity, and there's a whole lot of benefits to it that is, and I like it for the reason that it's not backed by any nation state. It's not backed by a corporation. It's not backed by any one individual. That's a huge thing. It's a very decentralized nature.
It's like disinflationary, meaning that we know the full supply. There's, the amount that's going to be mined each year until 2140, as opposed to the federal. I think that the US dollar in the last like 12 months, don't quote me on this number, but somewhere around 6%, meaning the amount of dollars printed has been 6%. That is a lot of dollars that the Federal Reserve has created this year. Probably mostly digitally. I don't think they physically printed this many dollars. I mean, definitely not. But yeah, I mean, that's a scary thing to think about. And Jamie, so you were posting about this on Facebook in 2011, 2013. What type of positive and negative feedback did you get?
Well, thankfully, around that time, I didn't get that much backlash because right around that time was the Occupy movement. And everybody was pretty upset about the banking system already. People were out in the financial district in New York, camping out. And then it became almost every financial district in the US and then across the globe and stuff like that. So there was a lot of animosity towards the banking system already in 2012. So I didn't get too much. I actually got a lot of receptive people at that time to Bitcoin and stuff like that.
Jamie, you're the quintessential example of writing and making content about things you care about and sharing them and seeing how it turns out. I mean, now fast forward, you're in Florida, you're on an island off the coast of Florida. What's your day-to-day life like now?
My day-to-day life is driving around on a golf cart because this is a little island. It's kind of a peninsula. It's a man-made island as well.
When you say little, like how long would it take on a golf cart to drive around the island?
A golf cart? About an hour.
Oh, wow. It's small.
Yeah, it's pretty small. And then I write about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies all day and the technology behind it. And, we homeschool our kids. I got 2 sons, Joshua and Franklin, and my wife, Liza. And we just live life as simply as possible and chill out by the beach.
It doesn't sound so bad. And Jamie, this interview will be going live on Christmas Day. So for those that are as crazy as we are to listen to podcasts about Bitcoin on Christmas Day, everyone listening, Merry Christmas. They're probably in a colder place than Florida, and they're thinking in their heads, they're fantasizing right now. They're like, wow, driving around on a golf cart with, my shorts, got the beach nearby. It's kind of the life that people work the 9 to 5 to get when they retire, and you're doing that now.
Yeah, I am. But I work hard every day too, man. I'm always writing and just cranking out articles. I'm already 3 articles ahead of the game every day.
Because, yeah, you've written 2,000 articles for Bitcoin.com in a couple of years. So you're producing, around 2 to 3 articles a day?
Yes, roughly around 2 to 3, mostly 2.
Wow. I've never asked you this. What's your writing process like? Like you get a tip, see a blog post somewhere else. How do you form an article?
I get tips from everywhere and I follow everything. So I have on my computer, I'm on Telegram, I'm Reddit, I'm on every single thing every facet that this industry has, I try to tap into and I listen and I'm watching and listening and taking it all in because I love it so much. So then I find stuff that really interests me. Just basically what interests me is what I write about a lot. And I like to see stuff with real world value. I like to see, things like people getting paid for their content on forums, tipping bots and stuff like that, remittance applications, people from other countries being able to send money, even though there's capital controls and stuff like that. That kind of stuff interests me, seeing demand for cryptocurrencies.
Being used as a cryptocurrency.
Yeah, I love that.
That's cool.
Some people like to write about these blockchains that don't do anything at all, and they're just a bunch of word salad, type of technologies, vapor, I guess. And I'm very into, and our editor-in-chief, Nanok, he's the same way. We're very into real-world applications of Bitcoin, it being used for what it was meant to, peer-to-peer, electronic, digital cash.
Yeah, it has to be used as a cryptocurrency. I think the same way. I think that these use cases are very important because if they're not happening, then that's going to show that maybe cryptocurrency isn't the answer, right? It can't just be this store of value without going too deep down the rabbit hole there. But I love highlighting use cases around the world because that's exactly what it's about. And related to that, we've talked about this before, Jamie. Obviously, Satoshi is the most important person in terms of, or group of people, whatever, or alien, whoever Satoshi is in the Bitcoin movement, but you can make the case for Ross Ulbricht and the Silk Road as number 2, because that was the first example. It was rough around the edges, but the Silk Road it showed a lot of people, and not just Roger, a lot of people in all facets of life. That's when they heard about Bitcoin, because of the Silk Road. Wow, this actually works as money. And you just wrote this story. Listeners, the Silk Road was called the darknet market. We won't get into the whole details of the trial and Ross Ulbricht, but long story short, it was a marketplace where you could buy and sell mostly drugs that people should be allowed to put into their own body, nonviolent. And, it's kind of the poster child for darknet markets that exists today, I think, because of the Silk Road. But Curtis Green, so we've defined the Silk Road marketplace. There was a moderator on the forum named Curtis Green. So, Jamie, I'll let you finish the story here. Tell us about Curtis Green and the movie and all the interesting things that you wrote about in this article, which we'll release on the podcast website.
Curtis was an administrator. He handled passwords and accounts and stuff. And he got involved working with the Silk Road by doing, administrative duties and stuff. He was a salaried employee. And one day when the cops started, getting really interested in finding the founder of the Silk Road, they came to his doorstep after he got a package of cocaine delivered to him, and he unknowingly took it into his house. And from there, they used this against him to do all kinds of things like fake his torture, fake his death. And he was involved with these 2 corrupt task force agents who were involved with the investigation as well.
They basically framed him, meaning they gave him a package, he didn't know what it was, of cocaine, and then they faked his death. Why would they do that?
After he got busted with the cocaine, he gave up passwords and account information to the police. And then from there, a few days later, staff members and vendors on the Silk Road lost about $500,000 worth of Bitcoins. So the authorities had told him that, Ross was upset with this and that he wanted Curtis beat up. So they did a fake torture. And the next day after they did the fake torture, they took it to another level, and then they said that DPR wanted him killed. And this is all coming from the mouths of, federal investigators, so we don't know if any of this is true. But he acted upon it, and he faked his own death for a year. He said he was on his hands and knees in the house, hiding from windows, and he stayed in his house for a whole year. And basically, he sold his story, as a screenplay, and he's written a book, and he's pretty much telling all about it. And he was there was 2 corrupt officers involved with the story as well, who stole thousands of Bitcoins, and he was kind of involved with that scandal as well.
Gotcha.
So the whole entire investigation is just a huge mess, really.
So Curtis was kind of a double agent. He was playing both sides.
Yeah.
And so basically, they're like, okay, we want to get to DPR, who they thought was solely Ross Ulbricht, right? Whether that's correct or not. It seems like it's not. But anyway, so we're going to get this guy, Curtis. We're going to frame him with some drugs and say, okay, you're working for us now. You're going to also help us frame the creator of this darknet market, Ross Ulbricht. And we're going to make it look like Ross ordered a hit on your death. And we're also going to fake your death so that we can say, hey, DPR ordered a hit, which is the screen name that Ross and other people may or may not have used. And you're going to kind of help us out there to get this guy into jail.
Exactly. And that's what he did. And the prosecutors, when Ross was arrested, they tried to, they used the hitman information, the whole fake killing thing in the case, but he was never charged for anything like that. So it kind of tainted his reputation in court.
It was a PR play.
Yeah.
Because it was bullshit, but they used that as a PR play. I mean, Jamie, just even being accused of murder and then having the allegations dropped in the era of Google and so forth, it's going to affect the way you look at someone, even if it's bogus.
Exactly. So, in light of the 2 officers that got caught stealing thousands of Bitcoins, it made the whole entire case, it makes you, when you read a story like that, it makes you think about why Ross is still there, what really happened, if his trial was really fair. And, it's just like that movie, Making of a Murderer and stuff like that. There's a really lot of bad things happening with our justice system in the United States, and it's not cool.
And why do you think Ross is still in prison today?
Because he was made of an example. He was a martyr. They wanted to put an example out there. This is what you get when you do such things,
And I don't think it was about drugs. I think it was about Bitcoin. And you mentioned in the article living counter economically, right? Describe to listeners who haven't heard that term before, what does living counter economically mean?
Counter economics is a philosophy it's also called agorism. And it's basically engaging in like voluntary, peaceful exchanges, and they could be any types of exchanges, whether it be white market, black market, or gray market. In doing these things, subversively, just because even when the state says it's not okay. Take, for example, drugs and stuff like that. There's a lot of people in this world that think that vices are not crimes, so they take part in this counter-economic activity, which also produces economics. Money is being traded, things of this nature, and it removes the state. It removes the state from the exchange, the voluntary exchange that should be allowed to be done in a peaceful manner without anybody's involvement.
Yeah, well said. And it all goes back to the importance of using cryptocurrency as a currency. If, sometimes when people ask me, I'll just play around like, what do you do? I was like, I work in politics. Like, politics, what do you mean? You hate politics? I was like, oh, yeah, I do. But I'm working to separate, the banks from the government. And the way to do that is, I guess, via counter economics. And Jamie, we haven't mentioned your family so much, but we know Josh, who's 9 years old now. He's pretty impressive. I mean, you gave him a Bitcoin wallet when he lost a tooth as the tooth fairy.
Yep. He loves Bitcoin. We talk about the stories that I write all the time. My two sons, I have another son, Franklin, he's 5, and my two sons, they're homeschooled. So our learning and the way that we do things is completely different than the way people do things traditionally.
Give me some examples of that.
Just talking about, how we learn about Bitcoin and money, and we discuss things in an entirely different way. It's not like a schooling atmosphere. It's they want to learn because they want to learn. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
They show that they want to learn. They are interested in it, instead of kind of pushing it down their throat kind of thing.
Right.
So like I said, yeah, my son Josh, though, he's the oldest, and he loves the technology. He has his own wallet. He's, done work at conferences with me that he's just, handing out swag and stuff, and a bunch of people have given him Bitcoin Cash for what he's done. He uploads his drawings, his doodles and stuff to BlockPress and Memo and stuff like that. He's made tips.
And listeners, for those that know what BlockPress and Memo is, I know Memo.cash is, tell me if this is right, Jamie, I call it a social network that's uncensorable on the Bitcoin Cash blockchain.
Yes, correct. So you can post content like you would on Twitter, and that content is on the Bitcoin Cash blockchain, and it cannot be removed. So my son, he would, scan his drawings, and then he would post it on Memo and BlockPress, which is basically the same kind of application. And he would get tips for it, small little Bitcoin Cash tips, but he loved it.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Joshua is going to be so far ahead of the curve when cryptocurrencies become a bigger part of just money worldwide. And I mean, finishing off here, you talked about this big experiment. Could Bitcoin still fail? Is it inevitable? Where are we going in the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years?
I still think it's very, very early. I look at myself as kind of like Johnny Appleseed, where I'm tossing a bunch of seeds around, and I just want things to spread. And I don't even know, maybe it may not be just, Bitcoin and stuff. I'm talking about free market economics and just learning how, money works and stuff like that. All kinds of seeds, and Bitcoin is a big seed. I think that, I might not be alive when it all goes down, but hopefully my sons and, other children will be able to get the main benefits from it. I think we're kind of like us right now, the early people. We're like just dropping the seeds in society and just wondering, hoping that it'll sprout.
Yeah, it's a multiple decade project.
I think it's a multiple decade project. I mean, I think it's similar to the internet, the way things were. When I was younger, I went from Windows 95 to dial-up modems and things of that nature. So that all changed drastically. And the internet was around for 20 to 30 years before the big boom in the 90s. So I think it's probably going to be similar. Email was around 20 years before email really took off. So that's the kind of thing right now. We're in that stage, I think, the pre-internet, the pre-email days.
That's very profound. And I encourage people listening to understand that I know a lot just to look at it as an investment or investment play, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But understanding the potential of cryptocurrency and having the patience, meaning that if, I don't know, there's 100,000 jobs in cryptocurrency right now, maybe declining because of the bear market, but whatever it is, people that are getting involved with cryptocurrency and are excited by it, especially people in their 20s, because if the young people are not interested in cryptocurrency, don't want to work with it, it will be hard for it to have success. But in a culture worldwide that's all about, getting rich quick and pretending like startups just because they get $10 million in funding that they're a success, when it really takes a sustained long effort in order to have success. If you're going to commit to this industry, you should be willing to give it at least 10 years. Again, that's a blanket statement there, but I do think for most people, that's the case.
Yes. And like I said, that's how I look at it. I just look at it as I'm a very, very early seed dropper, just laying out the knowledge so people can learn. And even I'm still learning to this day. I'm learning a bunch of new things that I've never learned before.
Yeah. Well, I read your articles, Jamie, because so listeners, we have a lot of great writers at news.bitcoin.com, but Jamie, I would say it's the best, or he's the one who handles a lot of the more technical aspects like the Bitcoin Cash hard fork or the wormhole. I read Jamie's articles. That was the best place to read it. And just listeners, wormhole is like, Ethereum has ERC20 tokens. Wormhole is doing that on the Bitcoin Cash blockchain.
You've heard the buzzword blockchain, but what impact will it really have on the world? Listen to the Blockchain 2025 podcast to find out more. In each episode, we take a hard look at one industry, like gambling, art, international trade, or wine, and we debate how it could be impacted by the blockchain. Subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Bitcoin.com podcast network.
And so, Jamie, the way I was thinking about the other day is with Bitcoin, there's a lot of people that don't want Bitcoin to succeed. I obviously hope and think it will. But either way, I do expect to spend the next decade of my life in this. And I think we'll look back at 2018 as either, wow, these were like the exciting times when it was just a little bit janky, didn't work so well. The UI UX wasn't great, wasn't accepted everywhere. It was very complicated. But these were the times when Bitcoin was being built. And hopefully that's A, or it'll be like B, 10 years from now, like a friend or a family member like, hey, Matt, remember when you were incredibly obsessed with Bitcoin? And I'll be like, no, I wasn't that. It's like, yeah, you were. You had like a Bitcoin hat, Bitcoin bathing suit. You were just all about it. And either way, I think it'll be worthwhile because you have to try, to change the system.
Yeah, it's the experience. So, you're living in it every day, So, yeah, definitely. I think it's worth it. You're throwing yourself out there.
Yeah, you have to. And we're doing that right now on this podcast. Humans of Bitcoin can be found at podcast.bitcoin.com. Check Jamie Redman's articles. You can just search Jamie Redman, news.bitcoin.com, or just go to news.bitcoin.com and check his stuff out. But Jamie, I admire the life you've built for yourself around Bitcoin and free markets on your island and your golf cart and, raising kids in a non-traditional way that seems to have a lot of wisdom behind it.
Thanks, man. Yeah, like I said, I love what I do. The one thing I'm pretty amazed about it is that this economy that we've produced, that people like me are able to live on cryptocurrencies, get paid in it and whatnot. And there's a huge economy out here, And even though the bear market is kind of a little depressing, we're still here. We're still going at it and still crunching along.
Yeah, still grinding, man. I think about you and Sterling and a lot of people in the space,
You were saying with the UX and the unfriendliness, back when I was in the early days in 2011, 2012, the UXs, the exchanges was nothing. It was horrible. So I have seen an improvement on that. And that, it continues to improve. There's thousands of exchanges now. There's hundreds of wallets that you can choose from. That back when there was only 5 or 6, in the early days. So with no customer support.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It is coming around. It's helpful to have that perspective that you have, buying 7 years ago. Jamie, thank you so much for coming on. This was a fun interview. And yeah, man, keep creating content.
Thanks for having me, man.
Thanks for listening to the Bitcoin.com podcast network. To learn more about our shows, visit Bitcoin.com/podcast. Bitcoin.com Podcast Network.